discuss about the various JSON response methods. Just to quickly recollect, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a lightweight format for storing and transmitting data, and JSON is often used for sending data from server to a web page. So it's basically very easy to understand a JSON format. It is self-describing and easy to understand. And this is the general format or syntax of a JSON file. It starts with curly brackets. So suppose the employees has 3 objects or 3 employee records. It is enclosed within flower brackets or curly brackets like this. So let's before we start about JSON response method, let's quickly revise or discuss about web scraping. Now web scraping is basically usually or traditionally it was done manually, where web scrapers used to copy and paste the website information they wanted into the spreadsheets. However, this takes a lot of time and energy. So especially when we are dealing with large businesses with lot of data, then thousands of competitors, then manual scraping becomes impossible. So that is why you have web scraping methods. So web scraping, you use the scraping APIs here, which provides a lot of advantages. You will have the data in a structured format, therefore it saves your time, as well as it avoids traffic on the web pages. So it avoids overwhelming the web pages with traffic. Website crashes would be easily avoided. Now web scraping basically is used for various purposes. For competitors, they use in research, marketing companies they use web scraping, best advertising channels they use. You can analyze the industry and market trends. So web scraping is a very important part, and XMLs and JSON plays a very important role for web scraping. So today's class we will be seeing how we can we'll just get accustomed to how Python JSON parsing works. How does Python JSON parse works? How we can pass through the web pages using some of the typical JSON methods. So some of the typical JSON methods that we'll be using is, so first thing is we need to understand what's a response. Okay, so whenever I make a request to a specified URL through the Python script, then it will return an object which we call it as response object. Now this response object gives access to various features of the URL like content, headers, status, and many more. So to get these information, we can use various methods, right? Response provides various methods to provide the content on the headers. So we will be discussing these methods of response in this today's session. We will be discussing how response.headers works, response.reason, response.text, URL, status code, raise for status, response.json, response.content, and close. So let's go quickly to the Jupyter notebook and see how all these various methods of response can be used. So let's go to the Jupyter notebook. So I have already created a Python script. So before we start working with it, I would like to know, I've taken the courtesy of this entire code is from this link. You can access this link to work on this on your Jupyter notebook. So first we need to import the request module. After that also import the Pandas and JSON module. Now let's first call a URL. So in our case I'll be using this API URL. It's very important that you fetch the data from an API. Okay, and to fetch the data from an API you need to use the function called as request.get function. So right here request.get, and within the arguments you give the URL name, and whatever this method will actually return a response. Okay, so that response I'll be now storing it in the variable called as response. So this is what I was saying, this is the response. So request.get method will return a response, and that I am keeping now in a variable called as response. Now I'll be using this response variable for accessing the methods that we just discussed. So let's first see what's there within this response after we execute. Okay, so let's execute now. Let's import the request module, import the pandas, import the JSON, and let's call the request.get function. Now let's see what this request.get has returned. So it's very important to see whether it has returned, whether it has been able to access the URL successfully or not. So if you see that the response has written a code called as 200. So if it has returned this code, it is basically an HTTP code that indicates success. So if the success, if the status code or this code lies within 200 to 229, then it's fine. Otherwise, it means that there is some problem and you need to check the URL in again. So now we can proceed since we have got a success message. So this is the same thing. You can also see what is the URL, right, in this response. So if you just type response.url, you can see this was the API that I was trying to access. Now coming to the first function, let's see what does the response.json method does, right? So basically this method will convert the response or the request response to a dictionary. Okay, response.json method will convert the request response to a dictionary in the Python. So it is basically going to parse the JSON data and print that data in the form of a dictionary. So when I say dictionary, it means you're going to have keys and you're going to have respective values for that keys. Okay, so let's execute this. So when I execute this, now you are storing the data in a variable API underscore data. So let me display what is that. So as you can see here now, response.json has passed through the URL and it has converted the response. Basically, it has converted the request response to a dictionary. And I said you have a key and these are the values. Right, so this is a dictionary where you have keys and values. So these are the keys and these are the values, respective values of the keys. So this was the first method we saw. We can also see what is the length of this API data just by giving length. So you have some 33 values in this API underscore data. Now we can also iterate over this JSON data, loop through it and print the data, right? So I can loop through these 33 values and print the data. So how do you loop? Use a for loop, key in API data colon, and within curly braces I am trying to print the API underscore data key. Okay, so we have the data in API underscore data. So I am just trying to print here the key values. Okay, so what has happened is key I will be displaying and I am putting here a colon. So this is the key I am printing and this is a colon and this is a value under the key. So how do you access the value? You have to say API underscore data key. Fine. So this is basically the entire dictionary that was obtained after calling this get request.get method. Okay, so we have printed here the keys and the values here for the entire keys and values. So next let's see that can I organize this in a better way. See the data here, if you want to print it in a proper way, there is no indentation here, there's no organization. So how do you do it? We can do pretty printing, right? If you want to do pretty printing of your JSON object, then you call the method called as Json.dumps method. Okay, now what does Json.dumps method will do is it will just apply indentation to your data. How do you do? You have to pass the argument. Okay, so just say Json.dumps. In that the first argument I am giving is the data, right, which I want to organize neatly. Then for the next condition option indent, I am giving the indentation as 4. So there will be is going to be a space of 4 for everything that is printed. And I am giving one more option called as sort underscore keys. I am making it true. So when I make this true, it basically sorts the data in an increasing order. So I am just organizing this data which I already have with proper indentation on the left hand side and also organizing it in a increasing order. So when I execute this, you can see the difference. So see the difference between this and this, right? You can see it is indentation has been made here 4 and I am also seeing that it is organized in the sense it is sorted, right, in an increasing order. So that was about the function called as dumps. Json.dumps does pretty printing, right, where you can provide indentation and you can do sorting through the sort underscore keys function. Now let's see the next method, response.status underscore code. Now this is a very commonly used method. Whenever you use get request function for accessing the where you give accessing the API and converting it into a dictionary, we need to check the status, right? We need to check the status. If it is within the, as I said already, between 200 to 29, it is successful. Otherwise it is an error. See, I can say, right, it is 200, so that means I have been successfully able to access the web page. Okay, now there is one more called as method called as raise for status. Now raise for status, it will return an error if an error has occurred while accessing that API web page. Okay, it's going to return you an error when you are accessing the URL. Okay, so this is very good if you want to do debugging. It gives us very good information about what if there is an error, what kind of error has happened. That error information is very useful for debugging. See, when I execute this, in our case we did not have any error, so it is giving an value as none. So this is very good in case of there is an error, we can do debugging easily. Now there's one more method called as headers. Basically this will return the header of our dictionary, right? This is our dictionary, right, which has been generated. So this is just going to return the header. So when you execute this, you can see that the headers of this dictionary is actually printed, right? Where in the headers we have just some month. If you actually go to this web page, you can see. I will just try to access this URL. Right, so I've been trying to access this URL, right? And what happened is this was the data was converted into dictionary with these were the keys and these were the values which were generated, and there will be headers for this, right? So that is what I achieved. I got the headers through the method called as response.headers, where I've got the date, today's date, the time, and as well all the other details. Now there's one more method called as response.reason. So this method will return a text corresponding to the status code. In our case, the status code was 200. So for that status code, there will be some text which is meaningful. So for example, if the status code is 200, the text is okay. If the status code is 404, the text is not found. So this is also very useful, right? If you just get the status code, and it is very difficult to debug because you don't know what exactly this number means. So if you get the relevant text, then that will be useful for debugging, right? So in our case, see, I am getting the text as okay because okay is the text for the status code 200. Suppose it is 404, right? The status code is 404, then you will get a text called as not found. So this is also very useful for doing the debugging. Many times real time you will face a lot of errors when you are accessing the actual APIs. So these methods are very useful. Now coming to the next one, response.text. Now this method will return the content of the response in Unicode format. So if you execute, you can say that you are getting this entire content of this web page or your dictionary, what you have got through the get request method, but it will be in a Unicode format. Okay, now the next method, that is response.content. Now this will return the content of the response in bytes. So execute, see here, you're getting here B. So basically I'm getting the content here in bytes. It refers to the binary response content. Now after you do everything, it's very important that you close your connection to the server. So to close your connection to the server, you just need to say response.close. So then it will close your connection. Okay, so to quickly revise, in this session we just had a quick introduction to the various response methods, right? We initially used a function called as request.get to fetch the data from an API, and store it in response. So a response is generated, and for this response, various methods we discussed. We first use the JSON function to store the JSON data. So API underscore data is actually having our JSON data, and we can also use the various methods under response, like you also saw Json.dumps where you are doing the pretty printing, and we saw various methods like response.status code, raise for status, headers, reason, text, content, and finally close. So try all these, get accustomed to these various methods of JSON response methods. Once you get accustomed, in real time you can do projects where you need to access, you need to have your own API keys, and from that you can generate you can get access to the JSON data, and from that you can get do a lot of web scraping functionalities using JSON. So thank you.